So my students started not so subtly suggesting that I looked like Steve from the Minecraft movie, i.e. Jack Black, I guess. And however you feel about that, it did give me an idea to make a project. Recently I've been playing a lot of Minecraft with my kids. I didn't get into it until like a year ago. And so it's funny that I started playing it and then all of a sudden they make a movie. But I've been really enjoying that time with my kids, and so today I'm going to try to make an enchanted netherite pickaxe as part of my Halloween costume this year. So I need a cyan shirt and this prop.
Let's get started.
So first we're going to need an image of the axe to work from. I pulled this off of an internet search. Now I've plopped it into Photoshop. And we're going to make it to where it'll fit on two 8.5 by 11 sheets of paper. Then I just cut them out and tape them together. If only I can find the end of the tape. After about 30 years, I find the end of the tape off camera. And I'm able to tape these two together, and I'm going to make the pickaxe a little longer than it is in the game. That way it fits my stature a little bit better. I am Steve. So my students never put up the tape right. So, I'm one of those people who like spending hours searching for the end of the tape. That's why I became an art teacher. But if you're one of those strange people who don't enjoy that, you can just fold the end of it like this. Me and my dusty wood. I think I'm going to blow it off. This is where the template comes in. I'm just going to secure it in place with some tape so that it doesn't try to move around when I'm tracing it with my marker.
Hold still.
Now I can trace the entire template with a marker so that I can cut out the shape with a jigsaw later. Now we're ready to cut. We just need to anchor it down so that the wood doesn't slide around. I've decided to make the rough cuts with a jigsaw, and then I'll take it over to the bandsaw later and make some of these finer cuts, because it would be a pain in the butt to get all of these little jagged edges with this jigsaw. I'll cut what I can, then I'll have to remove the clamps, move the wood, and clamp it back down to cut the other half. To be honest, I probably could have done most of this with my circular saw as well. Minecraft is a very geometric game, so it makes for some straight cuts. Truth be told, it probably would have turned out better if I had used my circular saw for about 90% of these cuts. I'm just not used to making things that are almost exclusively straight edge. Eventually though, it does finally dawn on me that all these sides are straight. Looks like somebody forgot to charge their batteries. Back to the jigsaw it is then. Now we can take it over to the bandsaw to make all of these little angular cuts. Now I'm not going to go too in depth in how to use the bandsaw. I've talked about it in other videos, so I don't want to waste a whole lot of time on it. But I will say that it involves a lot of starting to cut on one side and then you have to come back at it from another angle, making the rest of the cut from the other side. I tell my students it's a lot like drawing, but the pencil stays still and you're just sliding the paper around, so there is a slight learning curve to it. Another thing that you'll experience is that sometimes when you turn whatever you're cutting, it makes a very harsh change, while other times you have to turn it a great deal before you see any change at all. So it's really interesting in that way. So you just have to really keep an eye on it, move slow. That's what I always tell my students. The key is to just move slow. We're not in a race, unless, of course, you actually are in a race. Like me, I'm racing to get this done before Halloween so that I can take my kids trick-or-treating. Now, if you're one of my actual students, one thing you have to keep in mind is that the blade jumps off of this particular saw quite easily. So every time when you make a cut and you go to pull the blade back out, you have to turn the machine all the way off before you pull the blade out of your cut. If not, then this will happen. If you're in my class and this does happen, don't freak out. Just let me know and I'll come back here and fix it for you. There we go. Back in business. It's really hard to get a clear shot here because of all my bulging, rippling muscles. That's probably one of the most difficult parts of running this channel, is just trying to keep my muscles from getting in the way of the shots all the time. Freaking muscles all over the place. As you can probably tell, this was a little bit time consuming. You'll notice that by the time I finish this video and uploaded, it's way past Halloween. Spoiler alert, I got the prop done in time for Halloween, but the video editing took me a really long time. This was an exciting moment because it was starting to look like a pickaxe. Now we just want to smooth out and clean up some of the cuts on the belt sander. Now you might be thinking, hey, that's not a belt. Well, this sander also doubles as a pickaxe sander. I am Steve. Looks like somebody needs to clean out their dust collector. Obviously, with all of these jagged edges, I was not able to sand those with the belt sander. So I'm moving over to the vise so that I can use my orbital sander on all these little pixels. After that, there was still a lot of places left over that I couldn't even reach with the orbital sander. I had to do a massive amount of hand sanding. Just in case anybody's wondering, the only reason I'm using this file is because it was a straight edge solid object that I could wrap my sandpaper around. That way I could get closer to a machine-like edge on this pickaxe. It took a lot of sanding because I made a lot of wonky cuts with my jigsaw. Somewhere about this point I was really starting to regret my failure to remember that my handheld circular saw would have been much better for this job. So this might look like a lot of work, and it is, but this is what you have to do if you want something that looks quality. A lot of times this is the difference between a professional and an amateur. A professional will do what it takes and go that extra mile to make sure everything is perfect. Now we got to do more patchwork on these wonky cuts. And you can only remove so much material before you end up taking away too much. So now I'm drilling some holes in this so that I can add material back in. The material that we're going to be using is a 2-part sculpture epoxy. It comes in an A and B in equal amounts. You mix it together until you get rid of all the marbling and you get one nice solid color. I'm just going to take this stuff and rebuild some of the places that are too low that I can't fix by sanding. And once this stuff dries, I can go back again and sand it smooth and flush so it looks like it organically flows from the pickaxe and that it's all one piece, not some ad hoc piece of epoxy, which it actually is.
Shh, don't tell anyone.
I drilled the holes so that the epoxy has something to anchor to. It's naturally sticky and does a really good job of adhering to most surfaces, but I just wanted to make sure this was going to be extra strong and durable. With most sculpture epoxies, you have about 30 minutes to an hour of work time, and then you have a considerable number of hours to let it cure. So the next day, when this was dry and cured, I've come back and sanded it down flat, smooth and flush, to give it the appearance that it was always a part of the axe and it was not added later. I could paint this and be done with it, but I had the idea that I wanted to make these pixels different heights from each other. It's going to take a lot longer and it's going to be a lot more work, but I think it's going to be worth it. It's going to give it so much more variety, detail, and it'll just be more interesting for your brain to chew on in general. And so now I'm just taking a ruler and delineating between each one of these little pixels so that I can carve around it. I had a lot of different ideas about what would be the best way to actually carve these out, and you'll see me try a bunch of different stuff. I feel like I almost maybe had too many options. I didn't really know what to go with. I ended up running with a combination of different things. One of the things I used was this printmaking gouge. It was really good for carving out the initial lines, which would keep the wood from splintering when I used a gouge, and it would create a little physical boundary for me when I was sanding with my Dremel tool, like I'm doing right now. I tried this out to remove a lot of material at one time. I don't know that I would use it again if I had to do it all over again, but it got the job done. One of the things that probably would have helped me is if I was using the right bit. I have a bit that's more like a router, but for some reason I was using this instead. I didn't remember it until much later. Maybe I need to get some more sleep or something. You'll notice I seem to be forgetting a lot of stuff. I guess that means no more staying up all night trying to make an automatic cake crafting farm. I'ma just be up front with you guys. I really need to sharpen my chisels. All of them. I mean, it's getting kind of ridiculous. I would be using chisels in place of this Dremel tool if they were sharper. And eventually I do switch to them and use them dull. I have a 5,000 grit diamond stone that I use for sharpening things, and I combine that with a leather strop. Unfortunately, my youngest son found some of the wax that came with it and just caked it on there. So now it's really difficult to use. I just need to get another one probably. Oh, looky here. I finally found the correct bit. Let's see if that helps. Yeah, that seems much better. Still not as good as a sharp chisel, but it works pretty good. At this point is when I finally switched over to using a chisel. I ended up switching back and forth throughout the rest of this build, but at a certain point I just started using 90% chisel anytime it made sense, because I could remove a lot more material a lot faster. Even though my chisel was dull, I tried to sharpen it by what limited means I had. It wasn't the best, but it got the job done. When using the chisels on something really fiddly, like something the shape of this pickaxe, where it wants to slide all over the place and it's awkward, it's a great idea to use a bench hook like this. This is a wonderful tool that will lock in to the edge of your table and hold your piece steady as you carve it. This will really save your fingers. When you have a sharp chisel, it will cut through wood just like that wood is butter. And guess what? It'll cut right through your finger too. It'll cut right through your fingernail. It won't even slow it down, okay? So I cannot recommend the bench hook enough. It makes working on this easier, but it also makes it safer. It's just a win-win. Trust me, that chisel does not respect your fingers one bit. At this point, it started getting pretty exciting because my vision was starting to get realized. I had this thing cut out roughly to the shape of a pickaxe, and I had all these different representations of pixels at different heights, and it was really starting to look like what I envisioned in my head, and it was really nice. You're going to have these ups and downs when you're making sculptures. Sometimes it's going to look great, sometimes it's going to look crappy, and it's going to go back and forth. You just got to stick with it. Don't give up when you're at one of those low points. Keep going. There's going to be another mountaintop. Just push through the valley. So I've been told today that I look like an off-brand Jason Momoa. As you can see, it took a long time. It took a lot of effort to get all of these little individual pixels carved out. But I think the effect was worth it. So then when I got that done, I went ahead and primed it and blasted it with some spray paint. Why blue spray paint? I just kind of wanted the cool colors to enrich the depth of the shadows that are going to be in it.
I am Steve.
But also it was a spray paint that I had a lot of left over from the master sword that I made. So there's also that.
Stone pickaxe?
No, netherite.
Oh, netherite pickaxe.
It's going to be enchanted too. It's going to glow.
Look at this message there.
By the way, I also sanded the piece some more off camera before painting it. Your paint will always show your flaws, especially when you're talking about spray paint. Now I'm just trying to go around matching the colors that I see on the pickaxe, trying to lay down some colors and some values for a first layer. I'm not worried about being perfectly accurate for the first go around. I'm just trying to get a little bit of color on everything. Trying to make sure I don't really have a whole lot of missing spots and things like that. I'm gonna end up putting about 3 layers on this thing when everything's said and done. And I'm using an acrylic paint in case any of you are wondering. There was a lot of violets, browns, and grays in this pickaxe, and I tried to include a little bit of violet when I was mixing these into all the colors. And I feel like that really helped it look like the netherite pickaxe from the game, and also helped to tie everything together.
I think that's pretty decent.
On my second layer, I tried to be more careful with my colors. I tried to be more accurate and match them more closely with my reference photo. If you're very observant, you might have noticed from looking at my palette that I'm getting my violets from mixing a warm and a cool red together. Something very similar to a crimson and a cadmium red. And then I'm mixing that with a phthalo blue. All of it's like off-brand student grade stuff, so your results may vary. For the browns, I'm largely using a burnt sienna, and it might have a little bit of that violet mixed in. And I feel like I was able to get some pretty good results, so if anybody wants to try and replicate this, those are the colors that I used. Now that the pickaxe is painted, I just want to go ahead and seal all this in before I do a wash and before I put on my glow-in-the-dark pigments to make this netherite axe enchanted. It's always a safe bet to do that. It makes you more comfortable when you're putting on your stain, but you'll see here in a moment it was a really good thing that I did seal it in. Right now I'm just staining it with a dark wash. I'm using an acrylic dark wash, that way it'll dry faster. An oil wash usually looks better if you have time to let it dry. I like to take some earth tones and mix them with black oil paint and water it down really good with mineral spirits or turpentine, and that'll give you a really lovely effect. All of those nice oils will seep down in the cracks and crevices of your art, giving it such depth and richness. making the piece look like it's really been through some stuff, kind of antiquing it and giving it a history as well. If you get too much on, you can always dab it back off with a paper towel. You'll see me do that several times. Also, just there, I was using my fingers. Fingers are nature's napkins, of course. I was happy with the way the colors turned out for the netherite portion. In the end, I end up leaving one half regular netherite pickaxe, and the other half I have glowing and enchanted. I figured that I would be walking around in the dark and the glowing side would get more attention, but you would only be able to see one side of it at a time anyway. The enchanted side looks really cool in the dark, but the netherite side looks a lot more impressive during the day, so I want to be able to display it either way. Now it's time to see if we can make this thing look enchanted. I'm starting with a little bit of acrylic medium, and then I'm adding in a glow-in-the-dark pigment that looks about the right color to me. Once I got that thoroughly mixed, I just put on several thin layers. I went and tried to check it out in the dark to see how it was coming along and what places need more pigment and what places needed less. And I found out, much to my dismay,
Oh, that's the wrong color.
I am Steve.
the color that it glows is nothing like the color the pigment actually is. So I had to try again. This time I tested it to make sure it looked right before I went through the bother of painting it, and that looks much better. So I just went through that process again, same exact steps, after sanding everything back down and redoing it. Sealing that paint job in acrylic medium really did save the day. It allowed me to remove most of that glow-in-the-dark pigment without touching the paint job underneath. And for that, I am very thankful.
Well, I'm really happy with the way that the pickaxe turned out. There were a few ups and downs, a few moments where things weren't quite working out right, but we got it in the bag now. It's looking good. A lot of my students saw it, they loved it. So for an upcoming video, I'm probably going to make a mold and make copies of this so that I can give some of them to my students who are really excited about them. Thank you guys for watching. Until next time.
You can't have a netherite pickaxe without going to the nether.
Roll the glamour shots.
I am Steve.